Good evening. Well, thank you for good evening me back. That was nice. I appreciate that. My name is Steve Doherty, and I have the privilege and honor of serving this year as chairman of your official board, and it's my task and privilege tonight to welcome you to our annual congregational meeting. And I'll just quickly let you know where we're going to go, what we're going to do tonight, and then we'll get underway. We do have a couple of old business items to go through. One is the minutes from the previous meeting, which you should have picked up on the way in. If not, they are out in the foyer, and we'll dispense with those quickly, I trust. And then we have an annual report to go over. Pastor Tom will do that. You should have picked a copy of that up as well. I hope you did. This is going to have some shelf life. This is a nice one. It's very, in my mind anyway, it's very well done. I appreciate the work of those who were involved with this, so thank you for putting that together. You'll want to take that one home and hang on to it for a while. Under new business tonight, we have an Articles of Incorporation amendment that we need to disperse with. This is really, I'll talk to it a bit more when the time comes, but it's pretty simple. Back when 50 years ago, the state of Iowa required a 50-year limit on nonprofit corporations. They no longer require that. The 50 years is expired at the end of this month, and so we need to amend our Articles of Incorporation to show that we're in existence in perpetuity or until we vote to dissolve ourselves, whichever comes first. So it's a kind of a routine thing, but we need to take care of that. If you don't want to do that, we might as well all go home now because we're not going to be a corporation anymore. And then finally, we'll have the budget for the new year that we'll present to you as well. So that's the way the evening looks, and if you'd join me now, I'd open us with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do just pause to thank you for being you and for loving us and for providing the way of salvation through the shed blood of your precious Son, Christ Jesus. It is such an honor and privilege to know you, Lord. You have been so gracious to us. You've preserved us for a century and more. We look forward to that which you're going to do in and through your people in this church known as First Federated, represented by those of us who are here tonight. We give you praise, honor, and glory for the blessings and the honors. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Oh, having said that, we do have the minutes out there. I trust you've had a chance to take a look at those under old business, and if there are no additions, deletions, or corrections, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed. I have a motion. And I have a second. Very good, thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Very good, thank you for that. We'll now go to our annual report. I'm going to ask Pastor Tom to come up and share from that so that you have an idea of what we've been doing this past year.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening. Rather than walking through the report, which is given to you, is to capture the essence of this year past, and to provide, as Steve mentioned, a document that has shelf life that we can use with new membership class and all that kind of thing to orient people to our overall ministry. I invite you to read through it. It is in the most brief of summary forms when it comes to the finances, and then reports from our various departments, and concludes with items of prayer emphasis on the end. And the team did a fabulous job putting this together, and if you would please join me in thanking them for their hard work. I don't want to bypass, if you happen to have questions or concerns arising from the annual report, please feel free to do so. Remember, it is in the briefest of summary form, and want to get into greater detail and report to you this past year. And we'll spend a great deal of that time on financial matters, of course, that we're all concerned with. Also, just want to remind you this evening's meeting is being recorded on video, and it'll be able to be reviewed by others in the past, and you can recommend your friends come to it if they happen to miss this evening's meeting. And as I mentioned last year, the task of measuring ministry, what exactly do we keep track of? If whatever's not measured is not managed, and whatever doesn't get measured doesn't generally get done. And coming up with metrics or standards of measurement to measure ministries is something that the team is working on this year and will become more and more focused as we live into our future, where each and every employee and each and every department will have specific measurable metrics. And we're living into that, and that's quite a cultural change in the life of our church. But what our metrics do is it defines success as a congregation. I mean, what exactly can you measure in the government views what we do as non-material spiritual benefit? Well, how do you weigh that? Do you measure it? Is it volts? How do you amperage? Something like that. One of the things that commonly would be measured in a church would be what? Attendance, exactly. So let's look at the last 5 years of our attendance, and the figures I'm going to give you are only for adult attendance because of a change several years ago of how counts were done. So this is the only reliable history we have, is consistent figures of adult attendance. And the last 5 years looks just like this. In the last 5 years, we went from 770s, and this past year, 709. A decline of 68 people, for whatever reason. Now, that's only one way to measure. Something else we could measure, along with attendance, is new names and new faces that we see each and every Sunday. And we're consistently on a weekly average of guests. And guests are crucial to the life of any church. No guests equals no growth. And First Federated averages 3 new people each weekend. However, most of the experience of the staff, and probably yours, is we see more unfamiliar faces each week than numbers or names that come to us. And there's a lot of rationale for that. People oftentimes will withhold their contact information several visits until they feel comfortable. Nonetheless, about 3. Something else we could measure, what did we do out at the lake 2 weeks ago? Baptism, sure. The ultimate expression of life transformed. Baptisms over the last 5 years. Here we see from 17, rising up to 33 3 years ago, and settling back 17, and this year so far, but there's still time, 17 persons have come forward and confessed their faith in Jesus Christ through water baptism. So that's something else we can pay attention to. We could look at people coming to our website. Here's just the last 3 months, and in the last 3 months, 2,600 people have visited our website. 529 in the last week and 18 in the last day. This was captured about a week ago. Who are those people coming to our website? Well, we learned that 63% of them are people who've been there before, but 37% of them are people who are visiting our website for the very first time. How many of you do research on the website before you do anything major and new? Let's see your hands. Sure. Okay, good. Even some of you who say you don't go to the website, internet, raised your hands. And then we can look at other things that we measure. We can look at our general fund contributions, what people have contributed to the general fund. They look in the last 3 years, general fund contributions look a little bit like this. Here's the most recent year, and the trend on those general fund contributions is rather stable and flat. Next, we can look at the character of those funds and as they come in. Average monthly gifts. And the average monthly gift, contribution to First Federated is on a gentle incline, that the typical gift given each month is a little larger than it used to be, plotted over the last 5 years. Something else we can measure. If we look at this last year, then how those funds came in and what they looked like, compared to expenses, because everybody's concerned about that, income versus outgo. What we see going forward, the blue is the actual expenses, the blue is the expected expenses, and the red is the actual expenses. So on several months, like I said, just seeing if you were paying attention, blue is actual and red is expected. Thank you for that correction. From this chart, what can we conclude? There are times when expenses exceed expected expenses, and sometimes they're a little less. And it rises and falls with a nice, strong December. When we go forward then into, comparative of actual revenue versus the expected revenue, here we see total actual revenue, a nice strong December, as is typical. Those year-end gifts are coming. But there were times then when the revenues weren't quite what we had anticipated them to be. This chart shows us the blue is what comes in the offering plate, regular tithes and offerings. The red is that plus any additional income, bequests, special gifts, rental income, miscellaneous income, those kinds of things. And you'll see that occasionally those revenues are greater, but generally they're very close. In other words, what comes in on a typical Sunday, your tithes and offerings and generous giving, that is what funds the ministry, not the external gifts or the extra matters and bequests. By the way, if you're planning your legacy giving, be sure to remember First Federated Church as you plan your estate. Missions giving follows a pattern very much like tithes and offerings. Those special gifts that I mentioned, those bequests over the last 5 years, those bequests weren't, well, there's a pattern here, and you'll see in this last year, through the end of July, there was 22,000. The year previous, 111,000. And what we had done in creating last year's budget was to anticipate an average that simply didn't come through. That's why in the next year's budget, there is no income budgeted except regular tithes and offerings. Now, let's look at expenses. And first, let's look at the expenses that you find in a healthy, which translates into growing congregation. In a healthy church, 50% of the expenses go towards staff. They go towards payroll and taking care of the employees of the organization. In healthy churches, about 18% of the budget goes to funding the various ministry departments, all the departments that the pastors and other employees lead. About 18% would then go outside of the church to foreign missions, 10% would fund the facilities, and then roughly 5% in operations and administration and computer infrastructure and the various administrative costs. Our expenses break down through the end of July as follows. 47% has gone to our staff and payroll. 6% has gone to ministry. 13% has gone to missions. 28% has gone to the facility. That would be all of our energy costs, heating, cooling, water, which a great deal of that is the sewer costs, and insurance. That would be the lion's share, as well as repairs and improvements. And then 7% to administration. Those costs ran high this last year to unexpected failure of the server that takes care of all of our internet and email and all of our computer system and network here at the office. Those revenues for 2013 and 2014, where did they come from? 97% of all of the monies that came into the church, 97% were through regular tithes and offerings, your generous giving on Sunday or giving online. An additional 1% came in through bequests. It reads as 0%, $3,000, came in miscellaneous income, interest earned off things and things like that. Rental income came in at another 1%, and the Easter offering came in for a grand total of a little more than 3%, was all of the income other than our regular tithes and offerings. Who then are making their contributions to First Federated Church? Contributions, there were 375 member families that generously contributed to the congregation, to the church, and 136 non-member families that were also giving, which breaks down, we're all contributing households. There were 375 member households that contributed a total of $1,500,000. 136 non-member families, which made up 12% of the income of $219,000. There was $107,000 in gifts that came that were by way of cash and other gifts, for a total of contributing families of 567 who gave some total of $1,830,000. Now, contributor members and non-members of our membership, who then is contributing? This is of our members. And if we were to break it down demographically, and we'll talk about age. And so since we're talking about age, we'll respect our elders and start with the eldest. Families are where at least one household member is contributing. And we're getting much better at the database management and what's called database hygiene, where we can clearly discern now giving units and family units from individuals, which was rather difficult a year ago. So those who are 90 and above, gave 2% of the income. There were 17 families with a member 90 and older who gave more than $34,000. There were those between 80 and 89 years old, and there were 54 of them who contributed $115,000. Those then between 70 and 79, and there were 80 families contributed $382, or is that 28? $82,000. I'm doing my best to live in denial and not put these on. But Those then who were between 60 and 69 years old, and there were 83 families who contributed $374,000. There were families then of 50 to 59, yes, I'm in that group now, who contributed $205,000. 40 to 49 contributed 13%, or $188,000. 4% of the income came from those who were 30 to 39, and that's $63,388. And then those 20 to 29 family units contributed the remaining 2%, or $29,541. From these figures, what can you conclude about our congregation, about its giving membership? Usher, it was he who said old people pay. What else can you conclude? More mature, she would have said. All right, very good. What's that? I'm sorry, Tim, I couldn't hear the first part of what you said.
Those are the largest age groups as far as numbers of families. 80 and 83 would be the largest part of our church.
Okay. In terms of contributing families, I think it should be concerned to us the simple fact that there are more contributing families who are over 80 than who are under 40. Now, let's look then at what that means in terms of our contributing participation. 432 member households, we conclude, comprise the membership of First Federated Church. Of these, 375 households contribute, and 56 choose not to contribute, which simply says roughly 13% of First Federated Church's members' households contribute nothing. But the good news is there are 136 non-member families who are very generous in their contributions. Breaking down what happened in this last year in the various things that we can measure, and to sort of open up what those things that we measure tell us, that along with the printed report would be the report for this year previous. And I'm asking for questions.
I'm going to bring a microphone if you have a question, just so that everyone can hear it.
Not everyone at once.
I notice one of the things that we don't do is provide like a net worth statement, that shows any equity in facilities and things that we own, and also any surpluses that are there that carry over from one year to the next. And the reason that I'm saying that is in the last year and even in the coming year, it looks like we're going to be kind of deficit spending. And so do we have a surplus to go to pay those deficits?
We do. It's not as large as we would like it to be. When it comes to total assets that we report and carry over each year, it's a little north of 5,300,000. Oops, a little Freudian thing there. Just anticipating. Anyway, 5.3 million, and what we would have in total of reserve that we're carrying over is right around $100,000. All right, Mr. Chairman. Therein is your report.
Thank you, Pastor Tom, for that report. Appreciate the information very much. We will move now to new business, and we have this amended article of incorporation. Once again, for those of you who maybe were not here earlier, this is fairly simple, or at least we'd like to make it so. When the articles were originally done, we did not have the opportunity to be incorporated in perpetuity. The state of Iowa said 50 years was all you could have, so that's what we had. Our 50 years are up. We would like to now be incorporated in perpetuity. The state of Iowa says we can. That's all that this does. If everyone's had a chance to read these and understand them, if there's any questions, we'll try to answer them. But if you're okay with it, I would entertain, if there's no objection, I would like to take a voice vote on this. If somebody would move to approve the amended article. Thank you, Doug. I have a motion and a second here, Chuck Underwood. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the amended articles of incorporation. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We can exist for a little while longer. That's good. I was nearly out of this high-paying job that I've had now and you know I want to retire, so very good. Well, thank you. The next item of business is the proposed budget for the new year. I'm going to have Pastor Tom come up along with Glenn Bierman, our secretary, our treasurer, and make that presentation now.
Thank you, Steve. We're grateful for our bookkeeper, Karen Huff, who, while simply filling out an application, discovered that the Articles of Incorporation were going to expire at the end of this month. And when we contacted the Iowa Secretary of State's office, they expressed to me grave concern had that expired. There's a wee bit of a grace area, but if you go beyond that, you can it can be troublesome. So big thanks to Karen for catching all of that. All right, let's turn now to the budget, the proposed budget, which you've had in your hand as according to the Constitution now for several weeks. This was requested by the staff and then prepared by the Finance Committee. If any of the Finance Committee are in the room, would you please just, why don't you stand real quick, the Finance Committee, if you would, so we can get who you all are. There they are, the gentlemen, and not everyone is here who's on the, thank them for their work, will you? It's an arduous process preparing the budget. I see my predecessor, Tom Hefner, there saying, I don't miss this at all. I see that. Each one of the department heads would submit a budget that's visionary. And we don't always just say no, but what we say is, how about a little bit more specific budget? But every department's budget was returned to them, several of them multiple times, as we work to shave down the ministry budget, which I want to remind you makes up less than 10% of the entire budget, and according to national norms, ought to be twice what it is. So I really think our staff also deserve a tremendous round of applause for doing what they do with what we give them without complaint and making something out of it. So can you join me in thanking them? And I can read the staff's mind right now. I'd rather have something other than applause, but you do what you can. Okay. They would submit them, and generally on minimum they were requested to shave 8% off of that. Some were actually requested to take a big piece off of their budget. We'll get to that in a little bit as it relates to one specific area. The proposed then expenses by category looking forward will look like this. And let's begin with the biggest piece of our annual budget, and that is our staff. All of our employees are payroll. there was no increase to payroll this year. Now, the number is larger, but that's not increasing individual salaries. That's anticipating an increased cost starting January 1st on our health insurance premiums for our employees' health insurance benefit program. We were carried over with the administration's things. They were allowing us to, we locked in at 18 months because we didn't know what would happen and the companies didn't know what would happen. We still haven't been informed as of yet what changes there will be. But anyone here, has your health insurance gone down? Oh, let the secretary record laughter was heard at that question. By the way, for your own interest, there are 205 in attendance this evening, according to the tellers just text to me. So there's no increase to the payroll package. There is some things being moved around a little bit. There's a reduction in pay and augmenting for increased workload, but there is no increase in salary. There's no cost of living allowance this year. There's a freeze on our payroll, which I believe is our most precious ministry asset, are the people who 24/7 serve this congregation and do their best to reach this community weekday in, weekday out. Next, it's anticipated our administrative costs will be fairly similar to last year at about 7%. Some of the computer infrastructure and things are catching up with us that we're having to take good care of. And as you know, just the administrative cost involving the rest of our insurances and those kinds of things also don't go down. There's no change in the missions budget. That remains fixed. That's non-negotiable. We maintain our commitment to those 45 missionaries serving in 23 nations overseas and 8 nationals serving overseas, and then 8 stateside and 6 right here. Those monies go to fund them, and we make no drawdown on supporting those missionaries. Now we turn to the single most expensive item in First Federated's ministry plan, outside of payroll, and that is heating, cooling, providing water, insuring, repairing, and maintaining, and when we can, improving this facility. $426,766. Now, I want you to understand the biggest cuts in this year's spending plan, because that's what a budget is, a plan on how we will spend our money. The biggest cuts come in this area. Years ago, when you were working hard to retire your debt and were making your mortgage payment, when it was paid off, thanks be to God, you then would take similar monies that you had been allocating to paying the debt, now laying aside to maintain and to engage in improving the facility. To get this year's budget to a manageable place, instead of 3 times what it ought to be, we've compressed it down to a little more than 2 times what it ought to be. We are not going to be laying those monies aside monthly. Now, should bequests come in, or the Lord bless us with any unexpected or unanticipated gifts, or those monies that are in excess will all be allocated, unless they're otherwise restricted, to capital improvements so that we could stay ahead of the enormous costs on maintaining and repairing, particularly our facility. How many of you were uncomfortable this morning with a temperature where you went to your Sunday school or ABF? Anyone? Yeah, I see that. For the last 5 weeks, this building has run like a top. And every Sunday somebody would talk about it. Well, it finally caught up to us today. Do you realize we have 17 air conditioning units that cool this building that push more than 800 tons of air conditioning. If you didn't know, that's how they measure it. Well, 3 of those, one we knew was down for a repair over the weekend that just simply didn't happen by today. It was much more complex than we initially thought. But then 2 went offline, and we weren't anticipating those. One electrician was able to arrive and get it going. The other remained uncooperative. Just an enormous expense. So we are planning. There is money for the budget, and there it is for some contingencies, but not for any big ticket items. And that's a very difficult choice to make. And what we prioritize with the facilities, and Terry does a tremendous job in working with all of our maintenance staff to get the building is in the best shape it's been in years. It's running as efficiently as it possibly can. It was either making this very deep cut in this area, this foregoing laying those monies aside, it was either there or the very difficult choice of laying off employees. And the Finance Committee returned the recommendation that First Federated is in the people business. And the budget that was requested by the staff and prepared by the Finance Committee and approved by the official board took this into consideration. And there were many, many lengthy meetings working through this complex issue. But what it does is lay front and center to every one of us that our facilities create an extremely expensive ministry model. Nobody's arguing with that. Am I right, Terry? That we simply must recognize that was the 2 places these kinds of drastic cuts that would get the budget even close to be made. And it was the choice of the Finance Committee and the official board to make that decision. And that's how this figure has been drawn down as low as it could be. We're laying aside a number of projects that we would like to have done, but simply don't see how we can. We've laid aside winterizing the north side. There was a project to perhaps heat actually the sidewalks on the north side of the building to cause it to be less slippery in the wintertime. Our hospitality suite, numbers of things that we wanted to do that we are saying no to for the sake of getting the budget to a much more manageable position. That then brings us to the smallest, well, not to administrative, the second smaller area, which is all of the ministry budgets, comprise a grand total of $157,210. And that's after departments have cut, in some places, $10,000 and $15,000 out of their budgets in order to make the budget work as much as we possibly could. Let me just compare and contrast for your memory what these expenses are compared to what you find in healthy growing churches. Of 18, 18, 10, and 5. Versus what we will be utilizing, the tools we'll be giving our team this year, when on national averages of healthy churches and churches compared regionally and compared by size, 4% less on the mission side, 110% more on the facilities side, and 10% less out of the whole for the ministry departments to do their ministry. The proposed budget for this next year, beginning next week, is $1,703,370. That then creates a weekly need of $33,274. Mr. Chairman, this is the budget that the staff has requested and the Finance Committee has developed and the official board has approved that we now present to the congregation.
Let's go ahead and take questions.
All right, then we'll move right into questions.
Hold on.
I want everybody to be able to hear your questions, so I'm going to bring the mic.
Yeah, it's on. Okay. We have this huge albatross called the other area over there that's got the big stage and all the seats and stuff. What progress has been made toward renting that out more often so we can get some more income?
Well, there were 36 rental events last year, large and small. Only a couple involved that building, and you saw it brought in less than 1% of the total budget. The problem with the 87 facility is, and we rent that out, it's $3,500 and then an agreement if it's a paid ticket event, and we have people who work in that area. The problem is, in order for that venue to be rented, there's an additional cost to the renter that starts at $10,000 for lights and sound. That's what it cost us to have our only one event in that building last year, which was the 100-year celebration. So without improvements, which would be a minimum we anticipate for just the lights and sound of a little more than $150,000 that we don't have, the rental of that room is simply not very attractive to potential clientele. I wish it were otherwise. And there's also the continued problem of leakage, and that's not a new problem. And those kind of things. We've had far more interest than we've had buyers. And that's a shame that it is in the shape that it is, but we all share the history of how we got out of debt. And have I answered your question? The progress is slow. And I wish it were otherwise.
I don't know if this answers your question or not, Joe, but the bottom line is, this is just the raw bone truth. That building is not an asset for rental, period.
It's a liability.
No matter what we do, it is not an asset. It costs too much for any potential renter, and there are just a number of problems that go from lighting and sound to bathrooms to all kinds of things that if we were to put the money into it to make it an asset, we would go right back into debt, which would defeat the purpose to begin with. So that's just I know over the years there's been that clarion call, but the truth of the matter is it's just not a reality.
While we're on the topic, a standing committee was created to work aggressively at brainstorming and finding solutions to the future of the facility. And that standing committee is still working and brainstorming ideas. Any formal recommendations have yet to come forward, but the thinking ranges from very, very drastic things to pursuing other means of utilizing the facility for profit. It's like the price was right.
On the very last page of the budget, there are several items labeled new. Can you tell us a little more about those?
Those new are actually new departments in as much as we are consolidating the communication tasks into creating a new line item. And several of our personnel, Nikki Jackson and Dustin Demitz, are working in that area in communication. So it was a way of budgeting, consolidating all of that. And then community outreach, which instead of allocating those to separate departments, for example, VBS became an all hands on deck, all church activity. So we pulled the outreach component of that out of the children's area into all church. So that's what those mean. And Fit for the King, yes, we have a tremendous event coming up in January being led by Pastor David Bush, an outreach using our athletic facilities for the purpose of first of all, a weekend event that'll feel a lot like a conference and a lot like an expo around health and fitness, as well as a competition that'll occur with prizes and all that kind of thing. So that sort of paving the way for our facilities to be seen more as a community center and an asset to Beaverdale and 50310. That's what you would also see under community outreach. That's what Fit for the King means, and we're very excited about that. Any other questions?
I have a question on adult ministries. It's another new thing. It's talking about lay leadership stipends.
Yeah.
And as I understand, those were volunteer positions that we're now going to allocate money for that. And I'm concerned that Federated survives with many, many volunteers. And how do we decide who gets paid and who doesn't? It's a slippery slope, I think.
And it's a great question. And it's such a good question that I even asked the pastor of that area to provide me with a slide helping us see the vision of this, because it's not merely volunteer positions, it's sort of super volunteer positions. It's creating a director of Christian education, imagine in old school language, a Sunday school superintendent, but somebody to manage all of the details that go into running an education department. And this is all because, please understand, we have shifted Pastor Danny's role more directed towards discipleship ministries, and as well as the whole onboarding assimilation process of helping new people become faithful followers of Jesus through the ministry of First Federated. There's that. There's also a life group director position, and and hospitality. And these are extremely labor-intensive positions.
Yeah, but Tom, in the past, we've had Sunday school superintendents that did those very things, and they were volunteers. I mean, so we've had a history of those type of positions that were filled with volunteers.
I appreciate your concern. I do.
Most churches I ever attended, those were volunteer positions.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else in the back? Here we are.
Tom, help me with the numbers. I think I saw them when you put them up, but you're suggesting, I think, that we've got 435 families that attend Federated Church?
432 member families.
Okay, all right, fine. And also you mentioned, I think, what, 135 non-member families or something close to that?
Those were non-member contributing families. We have
Yeah,
far more.
We're giving.
No, I understand it. Now, my question, I guess, in relationship to the budget is, how do those numbers compare to a year ago? And not necessarily their giving, just the numbers. And it looks like we're going to go about $2,000 over the budget that we had to do less with to make the budget.
So where do we see the influx of money coming?
We call this a growth budget. We call it a budget that is a stretch, and we call it an exercise of faith. And each and every year, the anticipated giving when it comes to the budget was increased each year. How did we know then? The same way that we knew then, and we didn't know, but we trusted. And we do that again. Right here, Mike?
I just wanted to understand the number you had for the budget was $1,703,000. But what's on our sheet is $1,730,000. So are you saying from what was published is now
I must have
under expenses?
I'm sorry, I must have misspoken. It is $700,730,000.
Okay. So then it concerns me approving a budget that we're 41,000 in the hole on to begin with. Again, did you just kind of answer that we're anticipating people will step up giving to make up that difference?
Mm-hmm.
I hope my numbers are right. I've done a little figuring here. If 511 contributing households would each give $5 more a week, we have $130,000 more coming in, and all of this becomes academic. I don't know what circumstance anybody's in, how much they have or how much they don't have. I'm retired and take care of my grandchildren. Now Bonnie works, she's got a good job, but and she's keeping me to the standard that I've become accustomed to. But, and then that's not even considering the 55 households that don't even give any at all. And I don't want to be abrasive to anybody, but do we really have any difficulty, any of us, in not coming up with $5 more a week so that we don't have to worry about squeezing all of these areas of the budget? I know this is not dealing with approval of the budget, but it's, I think, pretty important stuff. Thanks.
Point well taken.
Thank you, Doug.
Anyone else?
I think one of the things I want to say about this is that we really worked this year to try to look at how do we minister better to the people that are here and reach out better to the people that we're around. And that we really looked at that hard when we were considering our budget this year, when we were considering what we should put in our budget this year. And that's why we're trying to increase the amount of our budget that is going towards ministry. We've increased it 2%, which is nominal when we started at 7% and we're going to 9%. That's not very much. But we're trying to work this so that we're actually working to reach the community and reach and encourage each other better. And that's one of the things that we were really looking at in the budget this year, is to try and actually apply the budget to our people a little better.
If anybody has to live by faith next year,
So if you want to pray about something, pray about every week that we've made enough progress over the last 4 or 5 years that God just lets things keep working well. But you know what? I'm not having any restless nights, and I'm not worried about God providing. We may have something break. I'm certainly we will. But I'm also certain that God will provide a way to deal with that. And when I was asked, was I willing to cut that budget? And you know what I said to you. I said, you just do what you have to do. And my exact words were, in the ministry business, not the building business. This building has driven us for too many years. And I don't care what we have to do, we need to do ministry. We need to reach lost people, our community. We need to feed and grow our people spiritually. And I'm willing to do whatever we have to do to just keep this thing working well enough that we can do ministry in it. And so I have a big leap of faith there myself, but I've just seen God do it before, so I'm confident He will. And we'll all work real hard to make that happen, buy well, spend the funds well, you know, do creative things to make things work. So anyway, let's keep going.
And I think it's also important for you to know that we had some unexpected expenses this year, especially heating. Really cold winter. We really had to overcome, we had a lot more heating bills than we anticipated this year. We have built into our budget some cushion that we didn't have last year. So hopefully we won't be going over budget in our heating budget because we have built in extra cushion. And it's possible that we'll be under on our budget there. So so you know, we have boosted our budget a little bit in that area so that we don't go way over budget in that area.
One right here.
Just a couple things. I know God can do anything, and it's like He's all things are possible. And I just think part of it is that, you know, last year it shows that we spent obviously $117,000 more than we took in, and we're anticipating another negative, and then deficit for next year after we take out the $120,000 or $24,000 that we turned around and spent. So part of that responsibility may be to let people know that there is a need, because you know God can also burden the hearts of the people to give, especially when they know or sense that there is a need. Because this is, in some ways, as you said earlier, I think it is somewhat of a faith budget. We're asking for an 8% increase in revenue, which we actually had a decline last year. And out of that decline, we had a deficit. And next year, we're going to have one as well with $100,000 in reserve. And that is $100,000 in reserve, right? That's give or take a few dollars. But anyway.
Depends on what the expenses
But I only say that positively. I just think that somehow there ought to be a way in which we also share the need. You know, that this is somewhat of a faith budget, that God certainly can do it, and He can burden the hearts of our people to give. So
we've committed to, on the back of the bulletin each week, to give you the most recent statement. Now, since expenses aren't even monthly, the most accurate information we can give you is quarterly. That's also why we send the quarterly giving statements. So make sure that your records match our records and give you an update of where we are. We're working as hard as we possibly can. We've had Dean and others working with our bookkeeping department as well as our accountants on could we give that on an even average monthly means. But has the information that we've been giving you on the back of the bulletin been helpful? That's what we want, and we're working to make it so it doesn't get 90 days out of date at the end of a quarter. Try to get it as up to date as we can.
Okay. I also think you did an excellent job in presenting the budget. Thank you.
Tom, I've asked Pastor Mike to do something as a part of the Finance Committee. Pastor Mike and Lamar did a lot of researching back on history, getting prepared for the 100-year program. And what they found was very interesting, and I think this congregation needs to know that.
Nothing like throwing me under the bus, Dean.
It's all done in love.
I appreciate it.
We do appreciate you, Pastor.
All right, so what I'm going to, I was just asked to do this. I'm not prepared. I didn't make any notes. I didn't know I was going to do this. He just asked me to share off the top of my head what I shared with the leadership. Back before the 100th year anniversary, several months prior, Lamar and I found ourselves in the attic of the 87 building where it seems like every record known to man is being stored as it relates to First Federated Church. And we spent almost 4 hours, I think, talking about the church and talking about his perspective and when did he come and what were his remembrances. And I dug out a ton of printed material. Somebody in the past has done a great job here at Federated keeping the history and keeping information available. And you just have to dig through a lot to get it, but it's there. And so I went through bulletins and business meeting reports and informational pieces that were sent to the congregation back when the church was at Beaver and Adams. And it was overwhelming to me as I went through the years to see a pattern emerge. In the 60s, specifically in the 70s, leading up to a certain point, everything that came out of this church talked about nothing but ministry. Ministry, 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 ministry to seniors, ministry to teens, ministry to children, missions endeavors, testimonies, articles, raising money for ministry, the fire escape, this, that, or the other, all the different things that Federated has been involved in. And that's all you saw. Ministry, ministry, ministry. And it just so happens that those are years where you saw growth. And people's comments, Lamar's comments, those were happy years. Those were exciting years. Those were thrilling years. And then all of a sudden, as though you just turned a curve, that information stopped, and it was money, money, money. We're going to build an addition onto the Beaver and Adams. We need X amount of dollars. This is going out from the board. This is going out in bulletins. This is going out in mailers. And, well, then that didn't work. And then another project, and then another project, and then another project, all of which 4 or 5 of them that I read about never came to full completion. And then it was here. And the $750,000 needed to buy this. And then another $1.9 million needed to renovate it. And then just a few years after we were in this, then $5 million to build the 87 building. And we went from communications that were about ministry, 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 to why we need more money, more money, more money, raise more money, more dollars, all going into buildings that, of course, I'm sure the rationale was if we have those facilities, we can do ministry, but the truth is that never quite materialized. We've continued to see that. And there's a corresponding change in the church and its attitude and its success of reaching into the community or lack thereof based on those two ways of looking at things. And, what I shared with the leadership was we have got to, no matter what it takes, and I mean no matter what it takes, we've got to get back to it being about ministry, 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 and not about buildings and not about, it takes money to do ministry. So money's just, the Lord just kind of tied those things together, right? But money for ministry is one thing. Money just to keep a building afloat is something else. And I don't stand before you tonight with the solutions. I'm praying like crazy trying to find the answers from God. And I'm consulting with any number of people to get perspectives from the widest possible array of people that I can get. But I don't know how it's going to happen, but that's where we've got to go, is back to where it's about the ministry. And so that's what he asked me to share, and that's what we discovered. And you know, if you took the time to look through the documents, it's undeniable, the difference. It's just around that 76, 78 time frame. It's just like just a big curve hit, and the whole communication changed, and that's when things started not being as good as they should have been or could have been. So does that satisfy what you were wanting, Dean? Yes? Okay. You're going to throw me under the bus again, I guess. Okay, go ahead.
Well, and I think that's what we, as an administration, are pushing to do when we say we want to reach out to the 10 and 11 window and to make this a church, a community place to draw people.
All right, I'm going to throw a slide up. I was going to wait till later, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to use it yet or not, but I'll go ahead and use it now because it seems the best. Wow. That is like, nobody can read that. But that is a chart that goes back to around 75. And where you see the green arrow is the last year of real growth Federated has seen, and that was 1986, the year before the 87 building opened. The red arrow is a start of a decline, which corresponds to 1987, which is when the 87 building opened, and you see a downward trend that during Pastor Nyquist's time, you see somewhat of a buoy up, but then it begins to come down, and from that point through the rest of his ministry into Roger Poupart's, into mine, it just continues to fall and fall gradually, year by year by year. And I show you that because that's charting our attendance. And here's the bottom line, friends. If we as a congregation are not committed to reaching into this community together and meeting new people and sharing the gospel and drawing them in together, then that will continue. It will not change. It was on a downslide with Tom Allen, the one who took you to the top. And then it slid again with Nyquist, who's now the president of Moody Bible Institute and doing quite well. And then it slid some more under Roger Poupart, who now is pastoring almost a 2,000-member church in San Antonio, and he's doing quite well. And it's continuing with me, and you can vote me out and get rid of me and bring somebody else in, and it will continue. It will not change unless we together be the church, be the ecclesia, and work together to do real ministry in a real community. Okay? I'm telling you, some people's philosophy is let's go out and get the best thoroughbred, so to speak, racehorse we can get, and they'll take us to the top. That is hogwash. There are no stars. There are no superstars. We're just all followers of Jesus working together. And if we don't work together and we don't minister together, if we don't give together and serve together and reach out together, that will continue. It will not change. And we're not but a year or two with a continued pattern there. And we will not be able to sustain ourselves at this location. This location is not designed for 600 or 500 or even 700. It's designed for 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000. And whether we'll ever get there or not, who knows? I don't know. That's God's business, really. By the way, next week as we finish up the series on the church, we're talking about church growth. You might want to come back and hear about that. You won't hear what you're thinking you're going to hear. But that's it. The answer, you know what? There's a story, an event in the life of Jesus and his disciples. And there was the need to pay taxes. Anybody read that? Remember that? And what did Jesus say? He told, was it Peter? To go down and catch a fish. And he said, when you catch the fish, the money will be in the fish's mouth. You take that and pay our taxes. Now, you have to listen carefully and you have to give me a little latitude here. But the resources that we're lacking are in the fish's mouths that we're supposed to be fishing for. Now, we don't fish for people for their money. That's recorded. I said that. We don't fish for people for their money. If you're doing that, that is wrong, immoral, unethical, ungodly, unbiblical, right? But it stands to be the truth nonetheless, that when you reach people and they become Christ followers and they invest in the ministry that reached them, and that's the problem, you see, is that we just keep doing insider stuff and the insider keeps going down. And we have to become outsider focused, meaning reaching the community, if we want this ministry to sustain and to thrive.
Thank you, Pastor Mike, Pastor Tom, and Glenn. Are there any other questions with regard to the budget? I have one right here.
Pastor Mike kind of touched on it, but I had written down here, what is the percentage of this facility that is being used, and what is the percentage of the building that we need?
Excellent question. The figure that we oftentimes use when we studied it is that 38% of the facility remains unused at any time during the week ever. Then there's a bigger footprint that gets used perhaps once a week. We are considering reallocating usage, meaning moving out of portions of the building that we are in, which would produce a direct cost savings. For example, just one that we're looking at. The classrooms upstairs in the 87 portion. If we were to, because that is the least efficient area, if we were to move classes out of that and not use that least efficient area, that would produce a direct cost savings, both of heating, cooling, and cleaning of that area. We're exploring a lot of options, and I think making maximum use of the portions of the buildings that we do use and doing a better job at minimal heating and cooling the balance will save money. That's why we have chosen to not, we only held one event in the large room this last year just because of the enormous expense. And you know, one of the reasons that our air conditioning is so susceptible to problems is because if we were to fire it up the 2 days in advance, we ought to be firing it up on Fridays instead of Saturdays in order to cool it to the level that it ought to be to work at optimum efficiency. But we have chosen not to save that full day of energy costs, all right? And that just puts a greater wear and tear on the air conditioning, just for example. So there are a number of options that we're going to have to get very serious about concerning our facility so that we can move more and more resources into ministry and less into the facility itself.
A couple of years ago, Terry did a study. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have around 275,000 square feet here. His calculations were about 100,000 square feet would more than meet the needs that we have and give us room to advance. So we have an excess of 175,000 square feet that really is superfluous space that all has to be insured, maintained, cleaned, heated and cooled. It's just part of where we're at.
Any other questions with regard to the budget? Jim? Jason, if you could catch him there.
Well, since Mike had brought up the fact about this chart, pardon me, popped in my mind what Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village. Okay, that's what I'm thinking about. I know we've had programs to teach us what to do, how to say it, and go do it, but it never works. Maybe 90% of us would like to go out and reach our people around the area, and each one of us would say, well, how am I going to do that? I can't do it alone. And I know we've had programs to teach us, to get us inspired to go. It might not be the right program. Maybe we need to have something to inspire each one of us to go do it on a regular basis.
I think you're going to be hearing more about that in the coming months and year. Are there other questions specific to the budget at this point, please? Specific to the budget.
You say budget. I wanted to talk about that, the percentage we're spending here. Can I do that?
Go ahead.
Okay. I don't want to open a can of worms, but maybe I am. I'm just going to be blunt. We're in a building that is we love, we're proud of. We're also in a building that is old. It's more than we need. It's way more money than we really can afford. We're driving a school bus and we need a Pinto. That's the reality. We've been here for 25 years, I think. Attendance has gone down. God can fill it if he wants, but he has not. I don't know why. We can look at those reasons. So we look at the future and where are we going from here. If this is what's handicapping us, and apparently it is based on the budget you guys have shown us, which we appreciate, then it would seem that the biggest issue is what to do with where we're at right here. And maybe this isn't the place we need to be. And we look for God's will on that, but we're to be wise stewards with the money. People are giving, but we've got a facility that's too expensive with too many repairs looking ahead of us, which we haven't even talked about, and they will come. And God can provide. But it would seem that we need to do some planning now for the future and face the reality that maybe this isn't where we need to be. And I know that's being discussed, and I don't want applause for this, please, but it's hard to talk about, but it's reality. And as a congregation, we need to be considering this and praying about it and praying for you men that have these tough decisions to make to know how to move forward.
The committee that Tom referenced earlier is doing exactly that, and we expect to have some recommendations certainly in the coming weeks, if not months. So we're looking at it very, very hard. I can assure you. Jason?
Is this on? Yeah, I just had a question when we were discussing about the classrooms upstairs or whatnot. I know, I don't know how long ago it was, but what used to be like the band room, the home builders were there. There was remodeling done, air conditioning supposedly, so that it could just be turned on just as needed. And I've been up there doing some classes, and it got cold very quickly. I thought that all the church that was going to be used was going to kind of go to that kind of a mentality that we're going to try and have all the rooms be on that kind of a system so that it could be more cost efficient, air condition wise, heating wise. Am I wrong about that, or what's the status on that?
Real quick, when the 87 air conditioning was changed out, we went from only one zone to 5. So we did move in that direction, yet those zones are still very large. Now, those particular rooms you mentioned are unique in that those rooms are air conditioned individually. That didn't even come out of our budget. That was a private gift that came to the church specifically for the redoing of those rooms. There's no way you could do that with all that, but we did economize by going to 5 zones, and that improves the situation, but it doesn't ultimately fix everything that we're facing.
It's kind of a follow-up behind of what Scott had to say, and I agree with what he had to say too, but on the flip side of it, if you're thinking about, as God has been speaking to Pastor Mike on just ministry and what he's laying on his heart, which he hasn't fully disclosed all that, but has tried to, as he feels God's leading him to share with us, that should be bringing more people in. Like I said, it's all about what God wants to do with our church. And if he leads us that we need to go to a different facility, I think we all, have an open heart and obligation to do that. But if we're truly being open and open-minded and prayerful about what God's desire is for our church to reach out into our community, and like Pastor Mike's been talking about, bringing people in. And as this gentleman down front mentioned too, $5 extra a week. Are we really searching our hearts as to how that's all playing out? So just a statement to throw out there.
Just so that you know, we've been talking about all of these things. There's not a single topic that's brought up tonight that the board has not talked about. And we are considering them, and we are praying about them, and we want you to pray about them as well. We take this very seriously, and I know you do. And we want to do what's best for us as the body of Christ, as the ecclesia that is called out. I appreciate the thoughts. We all do.
Is this on? Yeah. Well, yeah, I was trying to throw out a positive, so for you guys up there, I don't know if it didn't get across that way or not. I mean, I'm thinking, ministry, and we don't know what God has, ahead of us, but as Pastor Mike has been trying to kind of enlighten us a little at a time as God's been leading him and stuff like that. And we're reaching out to our community and stuff like that through new ministries and being in the neighborhood, so to speak, the 10-11 window. People should be coming in. This is a new thing that is happening that's, we don't really know all the specifics about it. But so I'm saying that's a hopeful thing and something to be encouraged by and not lose hope. And like you said, it's a faith-based budget at this point. So it was to be an encouragement, not to be saying, I think we need to hit the trail and run. So just so you understand that.
I appreciate all of the thoughtful questions and comments. Are you ready to vote on the budget? Thank you. What I would like to do at this point is have a motion to approve. Did I hear one? Okay, Jim Dusenberry moves to approve. Do I have a second? I have a second back here, Bill Wade. And at this time, I'd like the members of the board, the elders and the deacons, to come forward and distribute ballots. If you are an adult member of this body, please stand or raise your hand until such time as you have a ballot. After you have a ballot, and we have pencils too if you need them, after you have a ballot, then please be seated and vote. I would say if you approve the budget as distributed, write the word yes on your ballot. If you do not approve it, write the word no. The elders and deacons will pick the ballots up, we'll take them back in the foyer, and we'll count them, during which time Pastor Mike will have some comments while we're counting. And once we have the ballots all counted, then we will let you know the results of the vote. So I need no, that's right. I have a motion and a second on the floor, and we will vote by ballot on that. So please stand or raise your hand or something until such time as you have a ballot. And if you need a pencil, let us know that as well. Thank you once again for the discussion and the thoughtful comments. And you have a taste of what we've been wrestling with as a board now for some time. And we're at a point here where we've got to take some action. And you will, of course, be hearing about that in the weeks and months ahead. Pastor Mike, I'll ask you to come forward whenever the ballots have been distributed.
Once you have indicated your desire on the ballot, if you will pass them to the inside, and then someone will come by and pick them up, and we'll count them, give you a result, and we'll be finished. So if you'll pass those to the center, once you have filled them out, or it looks like maybe already got them. All right. Well, it seems like it falls to me each year during this time while the ballots are being counted to do a song and dance to keep you entertained. And no dances, no songs. But I do just want to reference you to the back page of the flyer, the report that you received. The back page is excessively important. The back page basically contains our vision, our mission, and our vision for ministry here. To love God, to love others, to make disciples. We are specifically seeking to help this church grow to accurately and consistently demonstrate our love for Jesus in tangible ways. What are those tangible ways? To become a church of private and corporate prayer. You've heard tonight about the challenges that we face. Every church faces challenges. There's not a church in town that doesn't face challenges. There's not a church in the nation or the world that doesn't face challenges. And how does a healthy church handle its challenges? It prays. It prays together. It comes together in tangible ways to go to God who has the answers, who can direct us and show us the path in which we need to take. We are wanting this church to grow in this area. Every month we have a prayer gathering here on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. What needs to happen here at Federated is a revival of dependent prayer in which the members of this church come together and this room is filled to capacity. And we cry out to God for the answers. We cry out to God for His blessing. We cry out to God for His direction. Faithful stewardship of our time, talent, testimony, our temple, the body, our treasure. We need to be faithful in what God has given us, using it for His glory. The increase of love shown to one another through the practice of the one another's of Scripture. That's where we're going for the fall series. Starting the first Sunday in September, and for 6 weeks following, we're going to be looking at love one another and what that means. And it's all based on the over 30 commands in Scripture as it relates to how we are to relate to one another as the body of Christ. All of that comes under loving God. We love God through these ways. The middle area there, that we will become an indispensable partner of the 1011 community through ministry initiatives that provide opportunities for redemptive relationships to be formed. We are planted in one of the highest percentages of unchurched people of our region. And we need to be reaching out to them. And there are a number of ways that we can do that. And the ways in which we are seeking to do that is in ways that meets needs for them, that opens the door for us to interact with them, to disciple them to faith, and then disciple them in the faith once they come to faith. And there are a number of fitness, recreational, educational, counseling, mentoring, parenting, marriage issues, ways in which we can reach into the real needs of this community and help them. And many of you have skills that could be helpful in doing that. And we will be coming forth with those initiatives in the coming year. But this is provided for you to pray about, us developing these things. And then becoming a disciple-making church. A place where people come to faith in Jesus, that they grow to spiritual maturity, giving their lives to the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. I think that the measure of a true mature believer is one who is giving their lives to the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. That's what we need to be modeling. That's what we need to be living in. And that's then what we are drawing others to do as well. We can't draw them into something we don't do ourselves. And so we must, of course, trust the Lord and grow with Him and rely on the Spirit of God as He moves us, but then we draw others in. What I'm going to ask you to do is commit to praying for these weekly. To ask God to bring a revival here. That's what we need. A revival of God's Spirit moving in our hearts and minds motivating us toward real ministry. Nothing will suffice for that. Nothing will replace that. And we're at a place where we either move in that direction or we move into further regions of irrelevancy. A church that doesn't minister to its community is irrelevant. And if we're going to be relevant, then we must be ministers. And I thank God for all that do, but we have to grow in that. So be in prayer with this and be supportive of what we're striving to do and how we're trying to lead. I guarantee you no one is wanting to enrich themselves or develop some kind of an empire here. We just want to serve God, and we want to serve God as a community with you. And so I pray that you'll do that. Mr. Chairman, do you have results for us? Okay, come and give those.
The results of the vote are yes on the budget, 180, 180, and no, 13, 13. The motion carries. So we have a budget for the new year. I would entertain a motion to destroy the ballots at this time. I have a motion to destroy ballots, and I have a second in the back, so we will be about that. Eric, I think, has them, so he'll get those destroyed. With that, we will, with your permission, we'll stand and be adjourned in prayer. Father, again, we thank you for the opportunity to come together tonight as a congregation to do your work. You are a faithful God, a loving God, and we are grateful for all that you've done for us this past 100 years. You have brought us this far, and we are content to believe that you will continue taking us that where you want us to go, and to help us to be what you want us to be. We pray that our discussion tonight and the decisions that were taken please you, that they bring you honor and glory, and that the decisions will energize us to do those things that help point others to Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen. You are dismissed. Thank you for coming.